Bible. We're actually going to read the gospel reading for next week, which is Mark 9, verses 30 through 37. They left that district and began a journey through Galilee, but Jesus did not want anyone to know about it. He was teaching the disciples along these lines. The promised one is going to be delivered into the hands of others and will be put to death. But 3 days later, this one will rise again. Though they failed to understand these words, they were afraid to question them. They returned home to Capernaum, and once they were inside the house, Jesus began to ask them, "What were you discussing on the way home?" At this, they fell silent, for on the way they'd been arguing about who among them was the most important. So Jesus sat down and called the 12 over and said, "If any of you wants to be first, you must be the last one of all, and at the service of all." Then Jesus brought a little child into their midst, and putting his arm around the child, said to them, "Whoever welcomes a child such as this for my sake, welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me, welcomes not me, but the one who sent me." These are the words of God for the people of God. Let us pray. Loving God, we ask that you may be with us in this space, all of which we've brought into this room with us, asking that you might be able to speak in a way that we may hear. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So this week has been a weird one for me. In my personal life, in the news, politically, globally, nothing seems to be as it could. I've spent time reflecting, and I think I've narrowed it down to one thing: fear. It seems as though I can look at just about anything in the world today, on just about every level, and find fear in it without looking too hard. Especially now that I have a sense of what it is I think I've been sensing. I guess on some level, we have this innate sense of dealing with fear in a few ways. We assess the situation, and if we don't think we can deal with the fear before us, we get ourselves out of there as quickly as possible. Other times we do the equivalent of playing dead and hope beyond every hope that the fear-inducing thing will pass us over unscathed. Then there are times when we'll just eliminate the fear by whatever means we have available to us. It's not always easy to detect the fact that fear may be playing a part in our decision making. Many people aren't aware of how much fear shapes their choices, directly and indirectly. Everyday choices can quietly be underlined with fear. For some, what we choose to eat and how much of it is underscored by the fear of what the food will or will not do to our bodies. For some, what we choose to wear is affected by the fears of how that dress might be perceived by others. For some, what we choose to say or not say comes riddled with fears. Will we be rejected? Will we get in trouble? Will we be misunderstood? Where we choose to live or work can have to do with fear as well. Many of us go into these decisions based on what we can gain. One location might come with good schools, easy access to the freeway, nearby parks and recreation areas. You get the idea. A job we choose might have benefits that will take care of immediate situations and in the future during retirement. Even as we strive for greatness and the benefits of the choices we make, underlying those things are the fears of what else could be. In the example of a house or a job, those choices mean not choosing a neighborhood that's falling apart or far from the conveniences, because we know that those tend to be associated with criminal activity. When we choose one job over another, even as we focus on the great stuff, the fear of not being insured or having some sort of retirement plans guide those decisions as well. The pursuit of greatness is often motivated by fear, even in the tiniest of ways. Being great means you're not the worst. Being great means you get benefits and access to goods and resources in ways that being not great doesn't always allow. Being great also comes with a cost. Oftentimes, the cost of another person or the threat of their pursuit of greatness being more successful than ours. I think that's where most of us are unaware of the fear that seems to be around us all over the place. Fear can lead to different pursuits of greatness, making us unaware and unable to see how we lose sight of what matters the most. We are in good company, though, as we hear from Mark again this week. Jesus and the 12 were on the road to Capernaum, and this is the second of 3 times that Jesus tells them what's coming up for them, that he is going to be killed, but also that he would be resurrected after 3 days. We have the benefit of history and tradition to be able to hear that and understand, but for those guys back then, it just was not sinking in. And instead of asking for clarification, they somehow end up arguing about who is the greatest among them. Fear can do that. Whether it's the fear of the unknown or the fear of all this death talk Jesus was doing, it seems fear crept into their minds and led them to this need to be great. I can totally relate to these disciples on that day. Last year, I founded and opened and now direct the Salas Center, which is Lansing's first LGBTQ resource and community center. With a steep learning curve, I hear, read, and engage in new skills and things that I just don't comprehend, and I find myself distracted with pep talks to self, reminding me how great I am, even if I'm not grasping it and fearing I might not ever. I find myself recalling a phrase that has kept me afloat for many years, and maybe some of you have heard of it too. Fake it till you make it. On the one hand, I find it's been quite empowering to talk myself out of giving up when things do get tough. On the other hand, it seems silly to pretend to have things figured out when I don't. Why not just ask for help from those who possess the knowledge and skills that I am seeking? What's the worst that would happen? Rejection? Being seen as not very smart or skilled? Perhaps unworthy? So when the disciples and Jesus get to the house, Jesus maybe reveals to the disciples their greatest fear. Being last. Being the most not great, which means the loss of many things, sometimes even one's life. I have a feeling that when the disciples were arguing about their greatness, it was an argument about who had accomplished more, who had more access to one thing or another, maybe even who they figured was Jesus' favorite. If you have siblings, you might understand that argument very well. So when Jesus sits before them, telling them that to be great, you must be the least, I imagine that must have had their heads spinning. Even now, with a fuller understanding of what Jesus was about, it can be hard to grasp. To further drive his point, Jesus brings in a child, one of the lowest and most vulnerable members of the population. They were being told to welcome a child, and in so doing, would welcome God as well. They were being told and shown that to be great, we must give up the distractions in the world that fool us into the wrong definitions of greatness. We're being told that there are certain privileges and benefits that we like, that we have to lose to be able to be the kind of great that God is about. To put it mildly, that is super uncomfortable. It is scary, and it's even dangerous. It's unwise in a society such as this to give up what we've got, because we'll find ourselves without and with very little to get us by. But I wonder if that's not really the point of all of this. In our pursuit of greatness, we lose sight of those who are least among us. We lose our sense of call to care for those who are hungry, abandoned, and in the margins of society. And if Jesus is requiring for us to occupy those spaces, perhaps it's only then that we're able to clearly see the devastation and disgustingness that we can ignore while we pursue worldly greatness. And I'm not going to stand here and wag a finger about choosing worldly greatness over God's inconvenient greatness. Instead, I want to invite us, as I did with the children, to name our fears. If someone could please help me hand out these scraps of paper. Thank you, Wayne. I'd like for you to write down any fears you may have at this moment. And when you're done writing them down, I'll invite you to leave them on the altar. Because I really believe that naming fear reduces the power it has over us. It brings us ever close to the kind of peace Jesus offers us. The countercultural, beyond our understanding kind of peace. It has us show up differently in relation to the fears we carry. This week, I also learned the power of naming my fears to myself and even out loud to some of my trusted communities. And so at the end of this time, during our prayer time, if you feel compelled to share yours out loud, you are welcome to do that as well. Fear has us asking the wrong question. Instead of what's the worst that could happen, maybe we can ask, what is the best that could happen? So we'll take a minute, maybe two, and just write down any of the fears that you're carrying in this moment. If you want to write your name on it, you're welcome to. It's not required. I'll be the only one to read these after you've done that. When you're done writing, please feel free to bring it up to the altar. And if you want to read them out loud, just hang on to it, and we'll do it during prayer time. And then you can put your slip into the offering plate when that comes around. At this time of prayer, If you've hung on to your sheet around your fears, feel free to share those at this time. But also at this time, I invite you to share any petitions of prayer that you may have.